Hi guys, it's Tom from Sorenzo Props here. I'm just about to start my first one-day build session. It's pretty self-explanatory. I'm going to attempt to build a prop piece from start to finish in just one day. The piece I have chosen to build is the pipe bolt action pistol from Fallout 4. It looks something like this. I'm not going to actually buy in any new products and materials for this. I'm going to attempt to make it from just odds and ends that I have lying around the workshop, quite similar to how it would appear in the game. Once I'm done, I am actually going to give the prop piece away as part of the giveaway on my Patreon campaign, so please check the link in the description. And let's just get straight to it and show you how I made it. Firstly, I got a video showing the gun from all angles, and then printed out a profile view, stuck it onto some foam core and cut around the outskirts. I use this as my reference for the entire build. I decided to use only materials and fixings that I could scavenge from my workshop, much like you would do in the game. I used an offcut of timber for the main body of the pistol, cutting it down on the chop saw. The barrel on this piece is sunken into the body, so I needed to drill a hole the same diameter as the barrel the whole way through the center of the wood. I used the 4-jaw chuck on my lathe to hold the wood in position and drill through from both sides, as my bit was not long enough to drill all the way through in one go. Making sure the piece of timber was positioned correctly was key to making sure the holes lined up. As the barrel of the gun is positioned off-center to the body, I kept the piece of wood oversized so that I could drill out the centers on both sides and then cut it down to size on the table saw. I adjusted the height of my blade so that I could remove the quadrant that would expose the barrel of the gun. Yay, the holes lined up perfectly. The barrel of the gun is only exposed on about 4/5 of the length of the body, so rather than to try and cut out that section, I cut the whole length and then added a piece of timber in at the end. I made sure to drill and countersink so that the screws would not split the timber as they were being inserted. I then set about adding some shape to the body. Firstly, I jumped onto the bandsaw and removed some of the excess material, and then I used the oscillating spindle sander, that's fun to say, to smooth out the edges and add more definition and wear to the piece. Next it was on to adding the details. First up was a large block where the handle attaches. This was made from PVC foam board cut to size on the bandsaw. I glued it in place, making sure to clamp it so as to get a strong bond. I then used a spade bit to drill a hole for the handle to be inserted into. The barrel was made of some PVC pipe. I first used a drill and then a Dremel with a small barrel bit to cut away and then shape the ejection port. The internal mechanism was made from a spring and 2 different sized pieces of wooden dowel, which were glued together with a supporting rod in the middle. These were held in place with a bolt, which was drilled right the way through the mechanism and the body. I wanted to be able to paint the wooden body of the gun and the metal details separately, so I set about masking off all of the wood before applying these details. Once the details are applied, it would be rather time consuming to mask in between them, so I chose to mask the whole thing off first instead. The thicker details of the gun were made using 3mm PVC foam board. This is a fantastic material to work with, it's easy to cut and sand and can also be heat shaped. I sketched out the components I needed, then cut them out with a sharp scalpel blade. To bend and shape the PVC foam board, I used my Dremel Versatip, which is a butane-fueled mini blowtorch. So this was carried out with great care. I gradually heat up the material and then bend it to shape over a square edge. I held the pieces in position on the body and then cut around them using a sharp scalpel to remove the masking tape before I attached them permanently. This will make the masking tape much easier to remove once the paint has been applied. I decided to attach all the details using genuine fixings instead of gluing them in place. I drilled pilot holes through the plates and the body and then secured them in place with screws. As this was a super quick build, all the details were sketched out directly onto the material using the reference image as a guide. This section was made from 0.5mm styrene. The pattern was drawn on, then cut using a scalpel It was then applied in the same manner as before, removing the masking before the final fixing. Styrene can also be heat shaped, but it's very easy to melt, so you need to take extra care. I used the Versatip, but you could easily use a heat gun, which would be much safer and give you much more control. Next up was the handle. I used a length of steel, and with a vise and a lump hammer I bashed it into shape, checking it against the reference image as I went. I drilled through the steel on the mill using a vise and a nut to keep the spacing right. An M16 bolt is used to attach the handle to the body. This design has 3 bolts which would appear to act as a trigger and cocking mechanisms, which were conveniently placed to act as additional mechanical fixings for the handle. Now it's time for paint. To the barrel of the body we're given a quick coat of primer and then 2 coats of gunmetal grey from a rattle can. This is a perfect base for all that rusted and battle-worn metal. Then it's on to my favourite part, the weathering. I removed all the masking tape and gave the wooden section a wash of a light brown acrylic paint, paying special attention to all those nooks and crannies, making sure to cover the wooden surface entirely. I then give it a wash with a darker brown, but this time I wasn't so focused on an even coat and would wipe away any excess paint before it dried. This was completed a couple of times using different shades of brown. Once I was happy with the colour of the wooden body, I repeated this process on the metal parts, but this time the paint was quite watery and I would dab it off and allow the watery residue to dry in. 2 or 3 layers of this in different shades of brown left a very nice rust effect. I grabbed the Versatip again to heat score into the timber to give it that wood grain effect. I used the naked flame to singe and burnish parts of the wood, again to give it a more rugged look. Remember kids, naked flames are dangerous, so if you're using one, please be careful. The scores were then given a dark wash to help them stand out a bit more. The grip was wrapped with wire and this was given a quick rust wash. I also applied some rust to the nut and bolt of the handle at this point. I then used some black Tamiya paint to blacken out some of the cutouts and some silver to do some dry brushing on the worn edges of the metal to really make them pop. Lastly, I used a 30-minute epoxy to bond the handle to the body of the gun. This gave me plenty of time to get it all square and get it clamped in place. And that's it. One pipe bolt action pistol from Fallout 4. The whole build took between 9 and 10 hours and I spent about 2 hours the next day painting. All in all, I was really delighted with the outcome of this first one-day build project. I'm quite gutted I'm now going to have to give it away. Thanks for watching, I really hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe and also please check out my Patreon where you could win a prop replica just like this one every single month.